Well, hey everyone, how's it going? Wanted to talk to you a little bit about using the R software. It was a nice day. Wanted to come outside, so I'm down here at the dock shooting some video. I apologize for the rooster. You're going to hear him occasionally. Hopefully it won't be too distracting. So what I basically want to do is I want to start with an introduction to R. What is it? This is a software that we're going to use in a lot of classes for a lot of things. A lot of future employers of yours are going to be looking for R skills, and so we want you to be prepared for that. And so let's just start by talking about what is it. And so we're going to talk about what is R and why we use it. When we talk about R, there's another program called RStudio that we use in conjunction with R. And so we're going to talk about RStudio in a little bit more detail, because that's what you're going to be doing a lot of the work in. And then I'm going to introduce this idea of packages, just so you know what we're talking about. So let's start by talking about, well, what is R? R is software for data manipulation, data analysis, graphing. And so if you're working with any kind of data, R is the program that everybody's using these days. It's also useful for things like mapping, so we can create maps from our data too, if you're into that sort of thing. But these days we all work with big data. You've got these huge data sets, and you need to be able to manipulate them, meaning, combine data sets or filter these big data sets. You need to do statistical analysis on them, and a lot of times you need to make graphs. R is designed for all of that, and it does a tremendous job. And right now it's the most popular software for doing those tasks, and that's why we want you guys to have some basic background in using R, because a lot of people, as I mentioned earlier, are expecting you to be able to work in R, and it's used all over the world. And so this is something that no matter whom you're working with or where you go, if you know R, you'll be able to work together. So why is it so popular, and why is everybody using it? A big reason is that it's open source, meaning that anyone can see the code, and so if there are mistakes in the code, people can catch them. Meaning that it's free, and that's a huge advantage, because previously a lot of programs that we used for this kind of work, you had to buy like a site license, and so the university would pay thousands of dollars a year. Open source means doesn't cost anything. Anybody can use it. And open source means that you've got lots of, you're crowdsourcing the coding. And so you've got lots of smart people all working on it. And so that tends to make it, in the long run, you can make better software and more efficient that doesn't make as many mistakes. Another big advantage is that it runs on any computer. And so whether you're a Mac person or a PC person or a Linux person, you can install R and RStudio and run those. It's really fast, and so if you're working with big data sets, speed becomes important. And it's easy to customize for your needs. And so you've got people in all different fields that are working with this, and you can tailor the software and make it do what you need it to do. And so in my opinion, knowing R is essential these days. It used to be kind of R would be something that would set you apart from other people. It would move your resume to the top of the stack. Now, I don't think your resume gets in the stack unless you know a little bit of R. And that's not just in the sciences, businesses and computer science. Lots of people are using R. Now, eventually, will it be replaced by something? Yeah, it will. But right now, R is the thing. Okay, well, why not R? There's got to be a downside to it, right? Probably the biggest downside from the student perspective is that you have to write code. It's not point and click. They used to have a saying, if you want point and click, buy a TV remote. Well, that's not necessarily true. Now there's some graphical interface, and that's what RStudio does. But at any rate, it's very code intensive. And so you're going to have to learn how to write the code, how to run the code, how to debug the code. And that is challenging. It is a different language, just like learning a different language. But I don't want you to get intimidated by that. First off, it's not too bad, and we're going to show you and try to help you learn how to work with the code. Secondly, you don't have to be a computer programmer. You don't have to be a genius at computer programming. You just have to know some basic ideas. And thirdly, in the 21st century, you need to know how to work with code in a lot of different areas. This is something that you can't really avoid. If you want to stay on top of things, you're going to have to be able to kind of understand at least the concept of programming and some basic programming ideas. Now, I mentioned the open source as a strength. Someone could consider that a disadvantage too. Open source means it's constantly changing. It means that people are constantly moving things around, and there's no consistent, there's sometimes not a consistent interface, and it can be frustrating. And so sometimes people will update the code and not test it thoroughly, and it will break, or it will break things. And so sometimes something that's worked for a year all of a sudden stops working. Another downside is there's no company you can call for tech support. And so if you're having trouble with, other software, you can call Microsoft, or good luck, but there's no one location that you can go to look for answers. Neither of these things, though, I think is a big deal, is a big problem. Like I said, the coding is the toughest part, and not everybody enjoys coding the way I do. Not everybody has a knack for it. But once you learn the basics, it becomes a lot easier. And, the more you understand the coding, the more you're able to customize your work. And if you can imagine it, you can make R do it. And so that's worth the trade-off. The second point, so what if there's not one company? Sometimes that's a problem. Sometimes that one company doesn't have good customer service. Since it's open source and everybody's using R, kind of like the whole world is your customer service. And there's tons of places to find help on R, and there's tons of instructional videos like this one I'm doing to try to help you understand this. And so, if you're having trouble with something, just Google it, and you should be able to find the answer. That's how the world is these days anyway. There's so much information out there, and what makes you skilled is your ability to go out and, not that you make mistakes or you don't know something. The skill is going out and finding the answer, and the answers are out there. So really, the upside of R is much, much greater than the downside of R. A thought that I want to leave you with, or a thought that I try to express all the time, is if you're having a problem with R, or if you're trying to find out how to do something with R, chances are someone else has already had that problem. Chances are someone else has already tried to do that. And so all you have to do is Google it and find out that person and find out what their solution was. That's how I learned R, and that's how I solve problems all the time. Bottom line, R is one of those skills that is important for working in the 21st century. One of those reasons why you come, you go to college and you take these classes is to learn this kind of stuff right here. And so my job is to help you understand how to use it, and that's what we're going to do with these introductory R videos. Now, I mentioned this too, there will always be a new thing. And so R is the thing right now, and at some point it will be supplemented by something else. But the pros always stay on top of things. The world's always changing, the software is always getting better, there's always new things to do, and if you're a pro, you're always staying out there on that cutting edge. Right now, everything is about R, and that's why we're learning R, and that's why it's important to learn R. Okay, so I mentioned it's not just R, it's also RStudio. Let's talk about these two programs. So R is the program that does the heavy lifting. It's the behind the scenes code, and if you want to, you can work with R by itself, all right? But it's very user unfriendly. It's all command line. It's all writing the code, hitting enter, writing the code, hitting enter, or copying the code, pasting it, and hitting enter. And it works, and that's the way I worked with R for a long time. But RStudio is a wrapper. It's a program that makes working with R much better. It adds a GUI, a graphical user interface, to R. And so RStudio is really where you're going to be doing your work. And then RStudio is going to be, it's kind of like the middleman between you and R, that kind of smooths over the edges and makes communication between the two of you a lot easier. And so common things like importing data, plotting data, RStudio makes those way easier. Exporting the plots. Also, an advantage of using RStudio is it checks your syntax for errors. And so as you're writing your code, if you forget a parentheses or a comma or something, excuse me, a lot of times RStudio will catch that and warn you. And so that's why we're going to do all our work with RStudio. It just really makes your life a lot easier. In my opinion, don't even mess with R without using RStudio. I did everything just with R for years. It can be done, but once a student taught me about RStudio and showed it to me, and I was like, oh yeah. And that's all I've used now, and it makes your life a lot easier. Okay. Again, both of these are open source, both are free, both will run on any computer. And so they seem to install just fine. So go download a copy and install it. One trick, install R first. RStudio is going to be looking for R during its installation. And if you haven't installed R, RStudio's got nothing to do, and it will ask, hey, where's R? And then it'll tell you. So just install R first, then install RStudio. Now, again, just like any open source, they're updated regularly, and that's a good thing. People fixing errors, people adding new things. Again, sometimes that does break other things. And so whenever you first start, you probably want to find the latest version, at least the latest stable version. A lot of times there'll be a stable version that a lot of people have used and tested and it works, and then there'll be like the cutting edge version, and you don't necessarily want to be a beta tester for this. It's not necessary to keep updating. And so you might notice in 6 weeks there's a new version of R. You don't have to keep updating it like you do with the apps on your phone. And it doesn't require that many updates. I usually update about once a year, and it's usually just because I'm forced to. Like I get a new computer or I reformat my hard drive, so I'm reinstalling everything. But you can run your version of R for a year or two, and you'll probably be fine. It is important to know what version you're running. And so sometimes you're going to try to do an analysis, or you're going to try to run something, and it won't work. And you're like, I'm doing everything right. Why won't this work? It just could be that your version is incompatible. And so just being aware of what version you're running will help quite a bit. So let's take a look at RStudio and the different parts of it. And so this is basically what it's going to look like. Of course, you can customize it how you want. This is how mine looks like. So the upper left, that's where you're going to write your programs. And in RStudio, they're called scripts, programs, whatever you want to call them. And so whatever you write up there in that upper left portion, you can save that. And that's another advantage of RStudio, is as you write the code, then you can save it, then you can come back to it and use it again. Or if you're going to writing new code and you're like, I did this before, you can go to the old code and copy it and paste it. And you could do that with R too, saving text files, but this is just more convenient. And so when you save those R scripts, they'll have a .r extension, and so you can just double click that and launch RStudio. So this is where you're going to be doing most of your work. All right. The bottom left, that's the console window. That's what R looks like. So if you didn't have RStudio, if you just ran R, it would look like this bottom left window. And so it's just a command line where you either type commands or you paste commands. And so sometimes if you want to do something quickly, if you just want to check something quickly, you can go down here to this command line, type it, and hit return, and get your answer. Sometimes when you run a command in the R script, the answer will pop up down here in the R console window. So that's what that window is. The upper right, there's just lots of important tasks that and important things. So if you create a data frame or you create a vector, it'll show up here. And then when you want to import data, this is where you go. So this is where a lot of routine tasks are accomplished in this upper right. The lower right has several tabs and also does several things for you. So you've got a Files tab, and so if you want to set the working directory, if you want to look for a file, it's like Windows File Explorer. You can do that right here in RStudio. The Plots tab is where your graphics will show up. So if you make a figure, if you make a map, it'll show up in that Plots tab, and then you can export it very easily and in a consistent format from that Plots tab. And so there are lots of tabs there for different things that you're going to use. And so one of the first things you're going to do when you start working with R is you're going to need to probably insert or import some data. And so you're going to need to find a folder, navigate to that folder, find a file that's got your data, and import that. And so the File tab is where you can start with that sort of work. When you look at the Files tab, it looks a lot like Windows Explorer. You can see I'm pointing to a button there that you can click on, and that will help you to navigate your folders. So if you're looking for a particular file, this is where you can look for it. Now, right now I'm going to give you a caveat. I'm not sure what version of RStudio I'm working with here, but some of this stuff will look different in different versions of RStudio. And so you may have a more updated or a less updated version of RStudio, and yours may look a little different, but the basic idea is there. You'll be able to figure it out. Okay, last thing I want to talk to you about is this idea of packages. And this is another strength of R. Packages, or maybe sometimes called libraries, these are little add-in programs that you use to customize R. So when I said that, an advantage of R is that you can customize it, this is one of those things I'm talking about. And so whatever your field you're working in, whether you're in business or whether you're in biology or whether you're in physics, ultimately there's going to be sort of a core set. You're going to be just doing, certain tasks that are common to your area of study, certain ways to analyze data or ways to manipulate data. What the package will do will give R the ability to work in that custom manner. And so instead of you having to write all this code, somebody else has done it. And you can just go grab that package and install it, and now you can do it. And that's a huge advantage. First off, most of us aren't going to be able to figure out how to write that kind of code that's that complex. But if someone else will write the complex code and then just let us go and stick it into our version of R, that's pretty slick. And that's what packages do for you. And so each package has some functions that have been specifically designed. And if you don't have that package, you can't do those functions. You have to get that package, install it, turn it on, and we'll practice that quite a bit. Now when you install R, it comes with a lot of these packages, all right? Others that are customized, you'll have to go out and download them and install them yourself. All of this is very easily done in RStudio, so don't sweat this. This is all very easy. It's, again, an advantage that RStudio gives you. Excuse me. Now all of this can be done on the Packages tab in the lower right of RStudio. And so here I've zoomed in on the Packages tab, and you see this huge list. These are all packages that I have installed on my computer, and each one performs some specialized tasks. All right, and so for example here, I'm just pointing out ggplot2. ggplot2 is a very common package that allows you to easily graph things and control everything in your graphics. And so one thing that you have to realize is that, you look at this list. I've got a huge list. Lots of these came with R, lots of these I've installed, but this also makes R customizable and faster. And so instead of all of these things always being installed for everyone, you can sort of pick and choose what gets installed. And so that keeps the code from getting too bloated and getting too big. And not all of these, you don't load all these into the memory every time you launch the program, which again would slow your computer down. You just pick and choose what you need when you need it, and that makes things run a lot faster. Another huge advantage of R and the open source code. Now, if there's a package that you need, but you don't have it, you can go to the install button here in RStudio. And that install button is very simple and allows you to search for the package you need and will automatically download it, automatically install it, and it couldn't be easier, all right? And so that's something, again, that we're going to practice. Now, you're not going to need many of these packages. Excuse me. You saw I had a huge list. A lot of those came with R, a lot of those I've never ever used. You'll find that there's a few core packages that you use over and over and over again, all right? 8 or 10 packages that you're always using, and the rest, and so don't feel like you're missing out on anything. Some packages just combine functions from other packages, and so, this package does one thing and this package does another. Somebody will get tired of using them both and will write a package that will combine the two into one. So that happens sometimes. And so sometimes when you install one package, it will have to install dependencies. It will have to go and actually install other packages too. That's fine. Again, it makes it easier. Installing packages is pretty easy. It's pretty automatic. Not really anything to get stressed about. I just want you to understand what they do. And again, I stress this over and over. You only have to install the package once. So once you go and download it and install it, then it's there on your computer. You don't have to do that every time. It's always available to R. Now, if you go to a different computer, then you'll have to re-download and install it. But once it's downloaded to a computer, then it's there and you've got it, all right? But just because you have it installed doesn't mean it's turned on or activated. And again, that reduces the bloat and that makes R run faster. And so instead of every time you launch R, it loads in all your packages into memory so they're waiting, well, that would really slow things down. You only turn on, you only get a package and put it into memory when you need it, but you have to do that. And so even though you've installed a package, if you don't activate it in your program or turn it on, you can't use it. And so this is something that is very easily done in a program, and we'll practice, but just be aware of that. One way to activate or turn on a package once it's installed is to go here to the Packages tab and click its checkbox. All right? And so if you look at my example here, you see all these packages are installed. None of them have their box checked. And so none of these are in memory, so none of these are slowing down the program. Now, if I wanted to use something in one of those packages and it wasn't activated, then I'd get an error message. And one of the skills you're going to have to learn is trying to interpret R's error messages and figure out where you screwed up. This is a common way to screw up when you're first using R. Now here in this example, I've turned on ggplot2. And so the box is checked. Now I have access to all the functions of ggplot2. So now if I want to make a graphic, I can do it because I've activated ggplot2. Now you only have to do this once per session. So if I launch R and activate ggplot2, then it's in memory, and then I can use it. And until I shut down R, I still have access to it. The next time I launch R, I got to turn it on again. So just get in that habit. Now, an easier way to activate your package so that you can use it is to just use this library function. And so you see here I've got library and then ggplot in parentheses, and I just run that as part of my code. I put that at the top of my code. That will automatically activate this package, and then I can use all the functions inside that package. And so that's even easier than going to the packages tab and turning things on. And so you just add this to your code, and then you automatically run it. And then if you are on a new computer and this package has not been installed, you'll get an error message. Okay, I got to go install it. Once it's installed, then you use this code to activate it, and then it'll run fine. And so again, it makes things a lot more streamlined and a lot easier when you do it this way. Okay, so when you start messing with this, it's going to be like a foreign language. It is a foreign language. It's a computer language, all right? All languages have vocabulary and grammar that you must learn before you can figure out what's going on. And just like learning any other spoken language, it's intimidating at first, but you will pick it up quickly. The more you play with this, the more sense it will make. I always say the learning curve is steep but shallow. When you first start, there's lots of things to learn and you're lost. But once you learn those few basic things, then the rest of R makes a heck of a lot more sense. And so that's a brief introduction to R and RStudio. And so we're going to get into some more details in future lectures, and then we're going to start working with R, and that's where you're really going to learn how to use it. So let me know if you got any questions. Thanks a lot.